The night was slowly enveloping the city, and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows created an eerie symphony that seemed to seep into every corner of the old zoo. My name is Alan, and I work as the night shift guard at Midnight Menagerie, a sprawling zoo renowned not just for its exotic animals, but also for its mysterious, off-limits sections that the general public never sees. Ever since childhood, I've been fascinated by animals and the natural world, which is why I chose this job, not for the paycheck, but for the opportunity to be close to creatures that most people could only dream of encountering. However, that particular night, an unsettling feeling gnawed at me, a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake off despite my love for the place. Among the various enclosures and habitats, there was one section that always intrigued me the most, the old, abandoned wing of the zoo. It was a place shrouded in rumors and whispers among the staff, a part of the zoo that was never open to visitors and rarely discussed. The old wing housed projects and exhibits that were deemed too sensitive or dangerous to be displayed publicly. Over the years, I had heard countless stories from my colleagues about strange noises, inexplicable lights, and sightings of creatures that defied explanation. Most dismissed these tales as mere folklore or the result of overactive imaginations, but I couldn't help but feel a pull towards uncovering the truth behind these enigmatic stories. That night, driven by a mix of curiosity and an inexplicable compulsion, I decided to investigate the old wing. I grabbed my flashlight, double-checked my radio for any transmissions, and made my way toward the section that was usually locked and guarded more stringently than the rest. The path was dimly lit, with shadows dancing ominously under the weak beams of my flashlight, creating shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own. As I approached the heavy, rusted gates that marked the entrance to the old wing, my heart began to race. The gates creaked loudly as I pushed them open, the sound echoing through the silent night. Stepping inside, the air grew colder, and the atmosphere thickened with a sense of foreboding. The once grand entrance hall was now dilapidated, with broken glass and scattered debris hinting at years of neglect. I could barely see a few feet ahead, the flashlight beam struggling to penetrate the darkness. Navigating through the maze of corridors, I felt an inexplicable presence watching my every move. The deeper I ventured, the more the air seemed to close in around me, making each breath feel heavier than the last. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the leaking ceiling and the distant rumble of thunder. My mind raced with thoughts of what I might find, ancient artifacts, forgotten animals, or perhaps the source of the unsettling stories that had plagued my colleagues for years. Finally, I reached the heart of the old wing, a large, reinforced chamber that was heavily guarded and secured with multiple locks and surveillance systems. According to the stories, this was where the most extraordinary and, some might say, terrifying creature was kept. A creature that had been the subject of many dark rumors, whispered about in hushed tones among the staff. With cautious steps, I approached the chamber, my flashlight cutting through the darkness to reveal a massive, reinforced cage at the center of the room. Inside the cage sat a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was neither entirely animal nor human, a grotesque amalgamation of features that sent chills down my spine. Its eyes glowed unnaturally bright, reflecting the dim light in a way that seemed almost sentient. The creature's body was covered in thick, coarse fur that shimmered in the flashlight's beam, and its limbs were elongated, ending in claws that looked sharp enough to tear through steel. As I stood there, mesmerized and horrified, the creature's eyes locked onto mine. There was an intelligence in its gaze that suggested it was more than just a wild animal. It was aware, conscious, and possibly even capable of understanding me. My mind raced, trying to process the reality of what I was witnessing. Was this some kind of experimental hybrid? A creature from another world? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. I took a step closer, my curiosity overpowering my fear. The creature tilted its head slightly, as if studying me, its eyes never leaving mine. I could feel a connection, a silent communication that transcended words. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, the air growing colder, and the room seemed to darken further. The creature's growls intensified, turning into guttural sounds that echoed through the chamber, making my skin crawl. Panic began to set in as I realized that I might have disturbed something that should have remained hidden. I turned to leave, but the entrance to the chamber had vanished, replaced by solid walls of darkness. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into complete darkness. The only light came from the creature's eyes, piercing through the blackness like beacons of malevolence. In the pitch black, I could hear the creature moving, its claws scraping against the cage, the sounds growing louder and more frantic. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for my radio, desperate to call for help. Static filled the airwaves, but there was no response, only the creature's relentless sounds of distress and anger. Desperation took over as I realized the gravity of my situation. I was trapped, alone with a creature that seemed to harbor a deep, unspoken rage. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing tighter, the air becoming almost suffocating. I could feel the presence of the creature pressing against my mind, its thoughts invading my own, filling me with a sense of impending doom. Summoning every ounce of courage, I forced myself to remain calm. I reached into my pocket and found my phone, hoping to use its light to navigate my way out. The screen illuminated the space, revealing the chamber once more. The creature was gone, the cage empty and silent. My heart raced as I scanned the room, trying to understand what had just happened. Had the creature escaped? Was it still lurking somewhere in the shadows? I didn't have time to ponder further. I sprinted towards the exit, my footsteps echoing loudly in the now silent chamber. As I reached the doorway, I glanced back, expecting to see the creature pursuing me, but there was nothing, only darkness and the oppressive silence that followed. I burst out of the old wing, gasping for fresh air, the rain washing over me as if to cleanse the fear that had taken hold of me. Breathing heavily, I made my way back to the main area of the zoo, every sense heightened, every shadow a potential threat. The normal sounds of the night returned, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, the rustling of leaves in the wind, but the memory of the creature lingered, a haunting presence that refused to be forgotten. I reached the security office, locking the door behind me, and finally allowed myself to exhale, the tension slowly ebbing away. As I sat down, trying to collect my thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within me. The encounter with the creature had left an indelible mark, a sense of unease that would follow me long after the night had ended. I glanced at the clock, just past midnight, and realized how much time had passed since I had first entered the old wing. The rain had stopped, and the first light of dawn was beginning to creep over the horizon, casting a pale glow through the windows. Before I could fully process what had happened, my phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from the head of security. A terse note informing me that I was no longer permitted to enter the old wing and that any further inquiries would be met with strict consequences. My hands trembled as I read the message, a mix of frustration and fear coursing through me. What had I discovered that was so dangerous it needed to remain hidden? And more importantly, what if the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows of the zoo, waiting for the right moment to strike? Determined to find answers, I decided to do some research the following day, hoping to uncover the truth behind the old wing and the mysterious creature. As I delved into old records and spoke with former employees, I began to piece together a story of unethical experiments, hidden agendas, and a creature that was the result of twisted scientific endeavors. It became clear that the zoo had been involved in something far more sinister than anyone had ever imagined, something that blurred the lines between science and monstrosity. Days turned into weeks, and my obsession with the truth only grew stronger. I couldn't let go of the feeling that the creature was still out there, watching, waiting. My nights were restless, haunted by dreams of that terrifying encounter, and my days were consumed with research and investigation. The more I learned, the more I realized the extent of the cover-up and the lengths to which the zoo had gone to keep their secrets buried. One evening, as I was reviewing some old blueprints of the zoo, I noticed a section that I had previously overlooked, a hidden passage that led directly into the old wing, bypassing all the security measures. My heart raced as I traced the path, realizing that this passage was likely how the creature had managed to escape the cage unnoticed. The discovery reignited my determination to find the truth, to expose the horrors that lay hidden within the zoo's walls. With a renewed sense of purpose, I decided to confront the zoo's management, armed with the evidence I had gathered. The meeting was tense, the air thick with unspoken threats and denial. They dismissed my claims as baseless and insisted that the old wing was simply an old facility no longer in use. But I knew the truth. They were hiding something, and I was determined to uncover it. As I left the meeting, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The encounter with the creature had changed everything, turning my fascination with the zoo into a desperate quest for answers. I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I reached out to a trusted colleague, Emma, who shared my concerns and agreed to help me investigate further. Together, we devised a plan to explore the hidden passage and uncover the secrets that the zoo had kept hidden for so long. Armed with flashlights, recording equipment, and a determination to expose the truth, we made our way back to the old wing under the cover of darkness. The rain had returned, pounding against the windows and adding to the tension of our mission. As we navigated the hidden passage, the air grew colder, and the sense of being watched intensified. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. Our flashlights flickered intermittently, casting fleeting glimpses of the eerie surroundings. Finally, we reached the heart of the old wing, the same chamber where I had first encountered the creature. This time, we were prepared. Emma and I set up our recording equipment, determined to capture any evidence of the creature's existence. We waited in silence, the tension building with each passing minute. Suddenly, the temperature dropped drastically, and an unnatural stillness settled over the room. Our flashlights illuminated the cage once more, but this time, it was empty. Just as we were about to leave, a soft growl echoed through the chamber, followed by the familiar, unsettling sounds of the creature moving. We held our breath, watching as the creature emerged from the shadows, its eyes burning with an intense, otherworldly light. This time, it didn't just stare at me, it moved with a purpose, almost as if it recognized us. Panic surged through me, but Emma grabbed my arm, pulling me back towards the exit. We ran as fast as we could, the creature's presence looming behind us like a dark omen. The passage seemed endless, every turn leading us deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the old wing. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, the sound of our own fear almost deafening in the confined space. Just when it felt like the passage would never end, we burst through the entrance, the rain washing over us as we stumbled into the open air. The creature stood at the threshold, watching us with those piercing eyes before it slowly faded back into the darkness, leaving us shaken but alive. In the aftermath, we presented our findings to the authorities, determined to bring the truth to light. The zoo was shut down, the old wing sealed off permanently, and the creature was never seen again. Some say it still lurks in the shadows, a silent guardian of the zoo's darkest secrets, waiting for the night to reclaim its domain. The experience left an indelible mark on me, a constant reminder of the thin line between curiosity and obsession, and the terrifying truths that sometimes lie just beneath the surface, hidden in the darkness. Since I can remember, I've always been drawn to old, dark zoos. They hold an eerie atmosphere, like a lingering presence from the past, something that sticks to your skin and whispers in your ear. So when I heard that the old city zoo had shut down again and all the animals were moved away, an idea crept into my mind, to sneak in, alone, and explore it in the dead of night. It was around 2 a.m. when I scaled the zoo wall and, breathless, stepped inside. The place was pitch black, with only the soft chirping of crickets and the wind rustling through the trees echoing around me. I turned on my flashlight, each step crunching against dried leaves as I walked through the old pathways, overgrown and neglected. Every step made me feel a bit more on edge, an unexplainable sense of dread prickling under my skin. But maybe there was a reason for it. I reached the lion enclosure, where crowds used to gather to hear their fierce roars. But the cage was empty now. Still, I felt something, like a pair of eyes watching me from within the shadows. Glanced around, but there was no one, only a faint whispering sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Just then, from farther down, I heard a low howl coming from the direction of the wolf exhibit. I followed the sound, each step pulling me deeper into the zoo's heart. The closer I got to the wolf's pen, the stronger the howl became. When I reached the cage, I shone my flashlight inside, and a shadow stirred. No matter how hard I tried to focus, it felt like I couldn't quite see it, like it was slipping through the edges of my vision. The howl slowly changed, morphing into something else, twisted cries that seemed half animal, half human, echoing deep within me. As I backed away, a chill ran down my spine, and suddenly I saw another shadow. This one, massive and vaguely elephantine, stood in a nearby cage, its shape barely discernible but undeniably large. Heart started to pound harder, and I instinctively took a step back. But with each step, the shadows seemed to follow, creeping closer. It felt as if at any moment they might reach out, pull me into their darkness. My breath came in shallow gasps as I tried to retrace my steps, but each turn and twist in the path seemed to loop me back around. I felt lost, disoriented. Then, out of nowhere, I sensed something right behind me. I turned around, and there, looming in the shadows, was a shape resembling a massive bear, its eyes burning with a furious, otherworldly intensity. I tried to ignore it, focusing on finding the exit, but the walls seemed to close in around me with every frantic step. Finally, I saw the gate. My hands were shaking as I reached for the handle, desperate to escape, but just as I touched it, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I whipped around, but nothing was there. Only the shadows, still hovering, still watching. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I threw myself against the gate, and, with all the strength I had left, I pushed it open and stumbled out. The moment I crossed the threshold, a wave of relief washed over me, and for the first time since entering, I could breathe again. But even now, whenever I think back to that night, the howls and growls echo in my mind. I can't shake the feeling that what I saw wasn't just my imagination. Were they the restless spirits of animals that had died there, or something far worse, waiting in the shadows for someone to disturb them? From the moment I started working the night shift at this old zoo, strange things caught my attention, things that were far from the ordinary dangers of wild animals behind cages. There was a presence, a feeling as though something darker lurked in the corners, hidden in the shadows, watching my every move. During the day, everything seemed almost normal, but at night, it was like the whole place was under a spell, and those seemingly harmless cages were keeping in far more than just animals. The night it all went wrong, the sky was thick with storm clouds, and flashes of lightning lit up the dark horizon. I was making my rounds with a flashlight, which barely seemed to cut through the oppressive shadows around me. As I passed by the wolf enclosure, I felt eyes on me. I turned the light toward the enclosure and saw a wolf, staring right back, eyes shining in the dim light, filled with a threat I'd never seen before. The animal held my gaze, unmoving, almost as if it were warning me. Trying to ignore it, I walked past, telling myself I was just letting my imagination get the better of me. But then I heard it, a low, mournful sound, coming from the direction of the elephant's cage. As I got closer, I realized the elephant was standing motionless, pressed up against the bars, staring straight at me with dark, intense eyes. It felt like it was trying to communicate, to warn me of something. I shook my head and tried to brush it off, but my skin prickled with unease. As I moved away, the low, soft sound of footsteps echoed behind me. Whipping around, I expected to find someone, or something, there, but there was nothing. Just the empty cages and thick, stifling darkness. I told myself it was nothing, but the feeling of dread grew stronger as I approached the lion enclosure. Inside the cage, the old lion, a creature I'd always seen as calm and noble during the day, had a new look in its eyes, a sinister gleam. It let out a low growl, one that seemed to rumble through my entire body. I took a step back, my pulse racing, and turned to leave, but not before I caught a shadowy movement out of the corner of my eye near the wolf's cage. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I broke into a run, heart pounding, aware of every eerie creak and distant whisper of movement around me. As I neared the bear enclosure, I saw the massive bear gripping the bars, its claws embedded in the metal as if trying to tear it apart to break free. It hit me then, something was horribly wrong with these animals. They weren't just beasts anymore, there was something twisted in their movements, their expressions, almost as if they were cursed, haunted by something dark. Breathless, I finally reached the security station and slammed the door shut behind me, trying to catch my breath. My hands were trembling as I leaned against the door, but before I could calm down, a scratching sound started at the door. At first, I thought it might be a tree branch blown against the door by the wind. But when I looked through the peephole, I froze. The wolf was there, right on the other side, but it didn't look like an ordinary wolf. Its eyes burned red in the darkness, its body twisted, almost unnatural, and as I stared into its face, I saw something disturbingly human in its gaze. My hands went cold, and I stumbled back. Backing into the wall, I heard the heavy breaths of the lion, bear, and even the elephant from outside, as if they had all gathered around, surrounding me. A dark realization hit me: these animals weren't just animals anymore. There was something else entirely, something ancient and vengeful, bound to this place by forces I couldn't understand. Then, suddenly, a low whisper echoed in the room, so close it felt like it was inside my head: "You'll never escape." My breath hitched, and before I could make sense of it, a shattering sound came from behind me. I spun around and saw one of the bear's massive claws reaching through the broken window, groping for a way in. That was the last straw. I bolted out of the station and ran as fast as I could toward the main gate, the shadowy figures of the animals close behind me. I could barely see where I was going as I sprinted through the zoo, my flashlight bouncing wildly, casting fleeting glimpses of twisted figures lurking behind every corner. When I finally burst through the main gate and stumbled out onto the street, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their eyes on me, following me into the darkness, even as I put distance between us. Even now, nights later, when the zoo is miles away and I should be safe, I still feel them, those red, gleaming eyes watching me from the shadows, their whispered voices echoing in my mind. It's as if that night shift never really ended, as if I'm still trapped in that cursed zoo, surrounded by those creatures, waiting for me to come back.